The army drives the tankers, queues at the gas stations and gaps in the shelves. This is not a good start to the Conservative Party's annual meeting, and the party conference has been running in Manchester since Sunday. Prime Minister Boris Johnson gave his grand address on Wednesday. It was the first party conference since the UK left the EU and the Brexit transition period ended on January 1st in 2021. This and the corona pandemic are putting the British economy to the test every day. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is under pressure to explain the crisis situation to the 10,000 delegates. Opposition leader Keir Starmer has already accused the government of poor planning. The problem of a shortage of workers, especially long-haul drivers, has been known for years. It was very clear that the time after Brexit should have been planned. The government did not do that, said Starmer. Now, it is unfair to let commercial enterprises go bankrupt because there are not enough truck drivers and staff in the hotel and restaurant industry, in the slaughterhouses and in agriculture. There was a shortage of 100,000 truck drivers alone. If the government now only issues 5,000 visas for drivers from abroad, this is not enough. The same applies to the poultry processing industry. We'll have to bring in as many people as we need to get out of the crisis, said Starmer. Long-term training needs to be done, but short-term action must be taken. The Conservatives do not want to admit this, of course, because it would mean that it may have been a mistake to give up the free movement of persons with the EU. It is now the fault of the companies that should have recognized the Brexit situation, that they should have trained better and paid higher wages. That was the tenor of the party congress. Johnson therefore claimed over the weekend that the crisis was the necessary post-Brexit transition period in order to increase the productivity of the economy. In 2016 and 2019, voters voted for a change in politics and an end to the ailing British economic model, which is far too dependent on low wages, cheap labor, and chronically poor productivity. We are moving away from that, said Johnson at the start of the party conference on the BBC. It is the new reading that justifies Brexit in his eyes. Within the EU, the temptation for companies to use cheap labor was too great. Without this facility, industry and trade would now be forced to train British workers. We are investing heavily in training measures and wages are already rising sharply, said Johnson. And the new slogan is, vote the Conservatives and you will be better paid. Well, first of all, it's only partly true that wages are rising. Since cheap workers in particular left the market during the corona pandemic, the current sharp wage increases of 8% are distorting the picture, emphasizes the Officer for National Statistics. Nothing has changed in the long-term trend. On the contrary, the rising food and energy prices, the increase in social security contributions planned by the Johnson administration, and the abolition of the temporarily increased social assistance will not lead to an increase in real income for low and middle incomes. The Resolution Foundation has calculated that the wage increases, adjusted for the one-off effects, have amounted to 3.6% since 2019. Given the 4% inflation forecast by the Bank of England, there's not much left of that. It is also not true that the change in the economic model described by Johnson was the basic idea behind Brexit. Rather, in 2016, the year of the Brexit vote, the Tory party wanted to keep EU immigrants out of the country because they allegedly exploited the welfare system and stole jobs from the British. Low productivity and inadequate training of the British workforce is a constant issue in British politics. When Great Britain slid into recession after the bursting of the technology bubble in the early 1990s, the Conservative government under Prime Minister John Major was already taking a look at the German model with its good education system. But the subsequent Labour government under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown insisted on sending as many young people as possible to universities. Services were declared to be the future of the British economic model, especially the booming city of London. Manual work was frowned upon. The German model, with its focus on craft and the processing industry, is a thing of the past, it was said at the time. The experts that Great Britain needed were brought in from Poland and later from Bulgaria and Romania after the opening of the EU to the East from 2004 on, and then you had the low wages. Great Britain did not even wait for the grace period for its own labour market. The UK economy needed workers from the EU during the boom of the financial boom. At that time, the British industry breathed a sigh of relief, which lacked the framework conditions to train apprentices in Great Britain in such a way that they could have met German or Swiss quality standards. It was only after the financial and debt crisis that the then new Conservative government under Prime Minister David Cameron and his Finance Minister George Osborne took the subject of training seriously again and created better framework conditions for vocational training. According to a study by King's College London, the number of apprenticeships rose by 2017, although the definition was what an apprenticeship is often is very different from what German entrepreneurs understand of a 2 to 3 year apprenticeship with a vocational school. Since 2017, British companies have had to pay a levy, the so-called apprenticeship levy, with which apprenticeship training is compulsorily financed. Many companies have said goodbye to training plans. With real wages falling and living standards low in Britain, the pressure on the British economy to produce cheaply quite increased. That's why companies are using as many workers from Eastern Europe as possible. With Brexit and the corona pandemic, however, a large part of the EU workforce has returned to their homeland, and Great Britain is practically cut off from the EU labour market. The British work visas are too complicated. The pay in the EU is even better, so there's little incentive to return to the UK. The Times reported on Tuesday that only 27 people had responded to the UK government's call to issue 300 temporary visas for tanker truck drivers. In other places I read it was 127. Johnson accuses companies of having to pay higher wages in order for the British to take over the jobs of former EU workers. This may be true in agriculture, in the hotel and restaurant industry, and in food processing. But professional drivers in Great Britain, for example, start with a salary of £19,000 to £24,000. That's the equivalent of around 27,000 euros a year. According to the Office for National Statistics, the average hourly wage for drivers has risen by almost 25% to £14.15 over the past 10 years, comparable to German hourly wages in the industry. The average annual wage is around £32,000. Trained drivers of petrol or chemicals earn significantly more. Those who pay well have no delivery problems. Aldi is known in Great Britain for the fact that the shelves there are not always empty, but Aldi has its own fleet of drivers and pays them an hourly wage of up to £15.34 and up to £18.41 for the night. And in addition, Aldi dominates the international import and export business of food, which many British companies still fail. The short-time working system, the Furlough scheme that the British Chancellor of the Exchequer Rishi Sunak introduced at the beginning of the corona pandemic, ends these days. It was a generous example of a social market economy that actually doesn't fit the Conservative Party. The model saved millions of workers over the pandemic. They are now gradually returning to the UK labour market. There are more than 1 million vacancies there to be filled. The months ahead will show whether the UK workforce will be able to meet this need. It's also uncertain whether the party congress in Manchester and the British public will accept that the current crisis is only intended to be the necessary shift towards a better economic model. Perhaps in the end, the accusation is that the government should have planned better. Johnson calls for a more productive economy. It does not fit, however, that he cut off his economy from his largest market on its doorstep, the EU. He has also built up trade barriers and taken workers away from the economy. Boris Johnson would make it easy for himself if he put the blame for the crisis on the companies at the speech before the party conference. They have warned long enough of Brexit and the end of the free movement of people. Johnson didn't want to hear about it, didn't even want to meet with representatives from the industry. His own Interior Minister, Priti Patel, celebrated at the party convention, triumphed when she introduced a new immigration law that is now keeping EU workers out. Party members and voters in the north of England will be happy to hear Johnson's call for higher wages, but this will hardly solve the country's acute economic problems, and we'll see how long you can keep up higher wages when you have to compete on the global market with those wages. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.